I'm Ruth Molman from the Farmington Hills Historic District Commission, and I'm here with Alice Benson, a longtime resident of Farmington and Farmington Hills, and we will be discussing the changes that have occurred in the last few years of the 20th century. And Alice, you were born here in Farmington?
Yes, my parents came here in 1940, and they were tired of city life and they wanted to have country living, so they bought 20 acres down on 9 Mile. And they put all the trees on it and their house on it, built a pond on it, put all kinds of pine trees on it, and it was really a great spot. I grew up with a horse and a pond to swim in, and a lot of kids came over to the pond, and it was fun.
Oh, I bet it was. And you had those ducks, too.
Oh, yes. My dad is a duck decoy lover, and he loves ducks, and they all came down there and swam in the creek.
Yeah, we have a video of that, which we did with your mother a few years ago.
That's right. Yes, we did.
With all the ducks going every which way.
Yes.
Now, when you were old enough to go to school, where did you go?
Well, when I started school, I went over on School Street, and at that time, the grade school, the middle school, and the high school were all one. It was just a really wonderful school. You could go from the grade school and go visit the high school. And it was an old building. All the stairs were sunken in from people going on them for so many years, and it smelled like an old school, and it had a charm all its own.
So your complete education was in downtown Farmington then?
Yes, it was, yes. But when they built the new high school, which is there today, which is Farmington High School, when I started high school in 1954. And they didn't have a pool, they didn't have a gymnasium, and my grandfather was a bus driver, so he would drive us from the new high school back to the old gymnasium for our gym class.
Oh my.
And our athletic field was where the park is now. They're on Shiawassee Park.
Oh.
We didn't have, they didn't have Falcon Field either. And that was where we played football, and all of our athletics were down there.
So you had, all this stuff has been built in the last few years then?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now you went over and you were checking with the principal at Farmington High School at the variation that they have changed. The requirements were different too.
Oh my gosh. Farmington High School now is a fabulous high school. When I went there, it was brand new, and the requirements were quite different. All we needed was 2 years of math, 3 years of English, and they had college prep, or no college prep. And if it was college prep, you had to take a language, 2 years of language, and then you had to take biology. And I graduated in a class of 150 kids, and we were all, the dress was much different than today's too.
Now what would happen if you came to school in blue jeans?
Well, we did. We did on Fridays. We could come on Fridays with blue jeans on. And the boys wore blue jeans, but they had to have a belt on so their pants wouldn't slip down.
Ooh.
Yeah. Teachers' dress was much different than it is today. Teachers never wore pants. There was always a skirt and a sweater and a jacket or a dress. And the men always wore a tie and a jacket. I guess they still do today. Mm-hmm. But the girls wore, we were the Bobby Sox generation. We wore saddle shoes and pleated skirts or straight skirts with sweaters and pearls. And our hair was in a flip or ponytail. And the boys had brush cuts or Princetons or the DA.
What's a DA?
Oh, well, the DA is where their hair was pushed back, so it looked like the back of a duck.
Oh my.
And they wore the Levi's, and I think that sometimes we were called either preppies, or the really bad kids with the motorcycle jackets were called greasers.
Oh dear.
And we had J.V. Harrison was our principal, and I think they've named a school after him now, Harrison High School.
Yes.
And we were the only high school in the place. So, and one of the big thrills that we had in high school was we would go shopping at the very first mall in the nation. It was Northland Mall. And it was so new, and people even had bus excursions over there. You could take the bus over there and have all of these shops in one place. That was really exciting.
Rather than the individual shops that were still downtown Farmington.
Yes,
Now, you said you had your own horse?
yes, yes. Our place is out there on 9 Mile by Drake Road, and my horse lived there. And there was a lot of kids that had horses, and we used to go riding in all these new subdivisions. And one time my horse was stolen right out of the yard.
Oh my.
And that was pretty big news. And Austin Grant was at CKLW. He was a commentator there. And he advertised on the radio of a lost horse. And my dad he said he would give so much money if the horse was returned. And we found the horse in South Lyon. A policeman's kids had it.
Oh my.
Somebody had stolen it and it went all the way over there. But I did get it back.
Was it in good shape?
No, he wasn't. They didn't water him and they didn't feed him, but he got back in good shape.
Now, did you meet with other youngsters to ride around?
Yes, yes. Several kids in my class. One of my really good friends, the Hoofnagels, who lived over there on 12 Mile, she had a horse and she would come over and bring her horse over and we'd put our horses in the pasture and then she would have dinner and would spend the night and then on Sunday morning she'd go home. It was a lot of fun.
She came from 12 Mile to 9 Mile on a horse?
Mm-hmm. And at Gill Road and 9 Mile, we had a horse ring there, and they had all kinds of horse shows. And my horse was a quadrille horse, and we did square dance on horseback.
Oh my.
And we had the big horse show there every year, the rodeo, they called it.
Now, were the Spicer children involved? I know they had horses.
They had horses, yes, they came over there too, yeah. It was great fun. It was country living, and but they were quite a ways from our house, and I don't remember riding with them, but I know that they had them.
They had the horses too,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a whole different society. I can't imagine taking a horse out on any of these roads now.
Well, 9 Mile was a gravel road at that time. And, you know, we just went on all these gravel roads, and certainly we didn't have the traffic we have today. So horses can go on gravel roads a lot easier than they can go on pavement.
Now, your horse wasn't startled at all by the cars that came by, the few cars?
Oh, yeah. They, of course, horses are always leery of that. One thing I was going to tell you, too, we always had horses in the parade. In the Memorial Day parade,
Mm-hmm.
and the horses led the way. And it was so much fun. There was a lot of people who had horses, and they always led the parade. And one time, on the last day of school, I rode my horse to school.
What did you do with him when you got there?
Well, what we did is we had a big picnic on the last day of school, and I took it down to the park down there and tied him to a tree. And that was great fun.
He didn't mind?
No, he didn't mind. He was happy. He munched on the grass.
I can imagine taking a horse down there now.
Yes, and another thing that when I was in the 9th grade in 1954, my dad finally bought us a television set. And so we saw the incoming of television. And I Love Lucy was on there, and Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse was on there. It's MICKEYMOUSE. We all watched that. And Milton Berle was on there. And there were a lot of programs, even some space programs. The space was kind of coming in at that time.
Now, your father would go to work from the farm?
Yes, it wasn't a farm. He was just we were gentleman farmers. My grandpa would come over, and we had a big garden. And my dad worked at the Roman cleanser plant. I don't know if you remember Roman cleanser. It was a bleach, and everybody used Roman cleanser instead of Clorox at that time. And so it was he worked down in Detroit. He drove 17 miles to work every day. And he didn't like the traffic then. He certainly wouldn't have liked it today.
He'd go down Grand River?
Yes, he would go down Grand River and then go down 8 Mile. And people, and I can remember during the war, downtown Farmington, they had a Conroy store. Actually, it's where the Firestone place is, the Firestone Auto place is right now. It was right in there. And it was called Conroy's. And they not only was a market, but they had a locker for people who shot deer, and my dad was a duck hunter, and we put it was a freezer. And we put all of our frozen stuff in there.
You didn't have the frozen lockers that they do today?
No, we didn't have freezers like that when I was a kid. It was the big locker, and that was a big draw, and you could go in this huge room, and then you had your own drawer, your own section for your meat that you froze in there. And that was quite different. Farmington was quite different.
Now, the Conroy's is, I understand it used to process the deer if you got a deer, didn't they?
Yes, they did. They cut it up for you, and they wrapped it into individual steaks or whatever. And then my dad would clean the ducks, and then they would wrap them up and then keep them there. And whenever you wanted them, you went in town and got them.
Did you do geese too, or just ducks?
Oh yes, sure. Shot geese, ducks, and my dad just loved ducks. He was a big hunter, and then he got to the point where he loved the ducks so much he couldn't shoot them.
Oh.
Downtown Farmington was quite different at that time. We had 2 hardware stores, and we used to go on Saturdays. Saturday was a big day of the week because we would go to the Civic Theater. We'd get in for 12 cents, and we would see 2 full-length movies, cartoons, a newsreel, and the most exciting thing was they had these weekly serials that they would run. My personal favorite was Lash LaRue. And each week you would go and see where they left off the week before. So for 12 cents, you were there from noon till about 6 o'clock. Mothers got rid of their kids every Saturday. It was so much fun to go to the Civic.
And they've reconditioned that. It's still fun.
Yes, it is. And it's still an inexpensive place to go. I'm so glad that the city of Farmington has preserved it.
This is something unique.
And right next to the show, we had dancers, dry goods. And they sold material there and sewing needs, and it was a very old building. It smelled musty, and I loved it.
You can barely find sewing things now. People don't sew that much.
I think that's true. And then we had a pool hall, and girls were not allowed in the pool hall at all. I used to try and look in there, and they didn't even want me to look in there. And then the Farmington Bakery has been a stable that has always been there, and it's where it is right now. It's always been wonderful, just like it is now.
When did Federal Department Store come in? Was that later?
Oh, yes, that was much later. Right on Grand River there, that was when it's like that first little mall in there. My grandma lived across the street, and I have to mention my grandmother. Her name was Mrs. Lancaster. And she taught expression lessons. And what that was all about was people would bring their kids in, and she would make them a book, and they would learn a recitation, and they would learn it by heart. And the object was getting up in front of people so they could speak in front of people. And then she would have a recital 2 times a year. And she would teach them things like manners and all that good thing, all those good things. And she had them there for 45 minutes for 75 cents.
She couldn't quite make a living on this.
Yes,
But
and then later on, the Federal Department store came in there. But where Federal's was, there was a mobile gas station there before Federal's, and I could see the flying red horse from my grandma's window.
oh,
And at that time, we would go, even when I was in high school, we would go over and get 50 cents worth of gas. My dad said, that's not the thing to do. You need to get $1 or $2, not 50 cents. But it was 19 cents a gallon. So Federal's took that place over, and it was, when my children were small, the Federal Department store was there.
so that was
Yeah.
after you'd grown up. Now, what kind of social things did you do besides your horseback riding,
And going to the theater.
into the theater?
There were dances, Malay dances and things there at the town hall that kids went to.
Yeah.
And most of my social life revolved around school. Proms and J-hops, and we had dances after all the ball games, like the football games. At night we would have a dance. Basketball games, they would have a dance after. I don't think they do that anymore.
Now, let's see, they had teams. Who would they play?
They would play people like Wall Lake, Bentley, Berkeley, places. That's all I can remember.
All
at
the
the moment.
suburban
Yeah.
schools.
Mm-hmm.
You went together.
And they're Class B schools.
Oh, they still have class.
Yeah, I think they're
Schools.
Class A now.
The Class A now.
Yeah,
The bigger schools.
a much bigger school. And it's quite amazing that the change in Farmington, there was a family lived next door to us, and their daughter is 6 years younger than me. And our class was 150 kids, and her class was 450 kids. Just 6 years. It was quite a difference.
They started building the other high schools too.
Yes, that's when they started building the other high schools.
And you didn't get moved around as much as some of the youngsters
No.
as they were building the schools.
No, especially in grade school when we were all at the same school, and we all knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then so some of the things, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Gilda Meister's Granary. That was a big granary, I think, where the Hershey ice cream place is.
And,
Right? It was all in there. It was a huge building.
that would be Grand River and,
Farmington Road.
yeah, right in the center
Farmington
of town.
Road, really, not Grand River. It would be like right across from Firestone there, where Pages is now. That was all part of the granary. I used to get my hay and my oats and everything for my horse there. And it was a big building, and the Boy Scouts met there, and different clubs met there. Oh, it was great fun.
They used to sell little chicks too, I think. Didn't
Yeah, I
they?
think they did.
And what was the Girls? Were you a member of the Girl Scouts or?
Yes, I was a Girl Scout, and we met at the Baptist Church. And there was a dime for dues. Every week we gave a dime. And I don't think the Girl Scouts have really, I don't know too much about the Girl Scouts today. I know they're still going because a few of my high school classmates still work for the Girl Scouts. So they're still going, and they're...
Did you do any camping out or anything like that?
Oh, yes, we did. We went to Island Lake, and that's right. It was at that time that Kent Lake was being built.
Oh, that's right. It's an artificial lake.
Yes, they dammed up the Huron River, and that was quite a boon to everybody. That helped a lot of things to do there, sailing and swimming, and you could go in the wintertime, go ice skating. And
Island Lake is still there. just across the road.
Yeah, it is. Oh, and you asked what we did. Now, there was a doctor in town named Dr. Gadbaugh, and he made a big ice skating rink across down Shiawassee Street there, where they go sledding now, you know, the big hill there.
Near the schools.
Yes.
School administration
Right,
building.
it was right across from the park there, Shiawassee Park. And after school, we'd all go over there, and then after dinner, we'd go there. And it was so much fun. You'd meet all your friends there and skate, and then go home and have hot chocolate. But the boys would play hockey, and the girls would skate around and flirt with the boys. And it was great fun. Farmington was a small village, and when I was a kid, we all knew each other. We knew each other's business. It's quite different than today. And one of the most fun things was the Farmington Dairy. Yes, when I was a kid, you could go in there. They would deliver the milk, you know, the milk bottles to your door with the cream on top. But you could go into the dairy, and they had those stools, and you could twirl around on them.
Oh, really?
But in high school, they redid the dairy, and so it was all the kids would walk from school up to the dairy and sit around, and they had big tables there, and you carved your initials in these tables, and you would have a cherry Coke. I don't think they earned much money. But finally, when my kids were small, which would be like in 64, 5, 6, it burned down.
Oh.
And it was so sad. It was just one of the most fun things to do.
They stopped picking up the milk, I think it was in 1956.
Oh, could have been. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
So it wouldn't have done the dairy too much good. They
Yeah.
there was quite a change when they were not collecting the milk anymore.
That's right. They didn't use the bottles anymore. They went to the cartons.
Yes.
And then down Grand River, you know, where the bank building is they call it the mall now.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I had my first savings account. And then they had Plumpton's Barber Shop with a barber pole that had the red and the white on it. And one of the things that was a big draw to me in Farmington is they had Max 5 and dime. You could go in there and get things for a nickel or a dime.
We have the dollar stores now.
Yes. That's right. You're right.
It must have been fun, but it's harder to get to them. You could get there a lot easier in those days. You could walk through the roads.
Just walk, yeah. I would walk from my grandmother's house there in Grand River by the Methodist Church.
So it is.
And I'll tell you, the Grand River was much busier then than it is now, because we didn't have the expressway, and all the trucks and everything would go by there, and on like a Saturday or a Sunday, oh my gosh, the traffic there was horrendous.
It would be the road leading out to all the other areas, wouldn't it?
Well, they built what Freedom Road. What we called it the cutoff, because that's what it was. You could take that road and go around. And so one of the pranks, it was a one-way street, and one of the pranks that the kids would pull when they could drive was back down there. It was a dangerous thing to do, but that's one of the things that they did.
And they learned to drive. I guess they let you drive a lot younger too.
Well, 14.
You know.
Yeah, you could get your license, and you had to have a parent with you. And but you had to be 16 to get your real license when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the kids still had large areas that they could drive on. Some of them were still had little farms out here.
Yes, there were a lot of farms right on Grand River. There was a big dairy farm, and where Saks Automobiles was there, right there, was a big dairy farm.
You know, it went out when they couldn't collect the milk anymore.
No, that they sold to the dairies. You couldn't go there and buy milk.
Oh.
It was, and then at the end, when they sold the farm, they used the house for a haunted house. It was, people could go through that. They made it a big haunted house. I think like they do up at the winery now.
You know, it's a shame we lost a lot of those houses.
Oh, I know, they were so much fun.
They used them for practice from the fire department too, I understand.
I guess they did, yeah. Yeah.
So,
So it was all a volunteer fire department then. And if there was a fire, people would, that were volunteers would drop what they were doing in town and go. There was a big fire siren and they would all go.
and put the fire out.
Yep. Quite different than today.
You know, we have a professional and they do a lot of medical things too, medical
Yes.
people. They didn't
Mhm.
have that then,
Yes.
so a difference. And there was no hospital locally.
No, no, there wasn't. You had to go to Detroit, and my doctor was down in Detroit. Although we had Dr. Gadbaugh, but we had Dr. Aschenbrenner, and he was where Dr. Mungie is now, right in there. You could go in there for Dr. Aschenbrenner. And his son was a big football player, Smokey Aschenbrenner. Farmington had quite a football team back then, too.
Girls involved is
In sports?
in sports and
Oh, gosh, no. We had GAA, was Girls Athletic Association, and we would play a little basketball and things like that, but not like today. Girls didn't play football, although I was a cheerleader.
you were a cheerleader.
Yeah, I was a cheerleader from 7th grade to 12th grade. And they had, they didn't have pom-pom girls or any of that stuff. We did have a wonderful band. They had baton twirlers, but they didn't have the girls that carry the flags, and it wasn't quite as elaborate. We did have pep rallies and all that stuff in school. Oh, one of the things I was going to tell you too is right on the corner of Grand River and Farmington Road, the northeast corner, and there still is a beauty shop there. We used to have Jean's Beauty Shop. And my mom would go in there and she would be hooked up to this machine, and it had all these curlers around and then the machine on top, and that's the way she got a permanent. It took about 4 hours. And she went there twice a year to do that. Other than that, she went every week to get her hair done. It's amazing. And then I think when I was in high school, or maybe grade school, the Tony Home Permanents came in.
Oh my.
Yeah. You wouldn't know anything about that. You got curly hair.
Yeah, I'm lucky.
You are lucky. But I always remember these huge silver machines that my mother was hooked up to. I don't know what all they did to her, whether they zapped her with electricity and curled her hair or just what.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and bringing us all this information.
Oh, it was so much fun reminiscing with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Our pleasure.